what we did was we learned how to draw parabolas. So in the last lesson, we learned how to draw parabolas, and there were 5 steps. Step 1 was the shape. Step 2 was the y-intercept. Step 3 was the x-intercept. Step 4 was the axis of symmetry. Step 5 was the turning point. So that is what we spent our time talking about in the last lesson. We also spoke about the fact that parabolas come in standard form, and they also come in what's called the turning point form, where given the turning point form, the turning point would just be minus PQ. Now, before I start today's lesson, I want to ask for a score out of 10 about how you guys are feeling about drawing parabolas. And also, are there any questions from the last lesson you want me to clear up before I get going? Anything more you want to know? I know one of the things that I'm remembering that for a couple of students might have been new is you find the axis of symmetry with the formula minus b over 2a. And then sometimes you have to go from, let's say you have a parabola in the turning point form or the alternate form. One of the exercises we did in the last lesson was to say, look, if it's in this form, the turning point of this particular graph would be minus 2,5. And that can be a helpful idea, being able to go from the turning point form to actually get the turning point. Okay, well, I've heard no questions, and I'm just waiting for a score out of 10 from the other students. Give me a score out of 10 for how well you understand drawing parabolas, and then we can move on to today's lesson, which is finding the equation of parabolas. So if you're given a drawing, how do you find the equations of parabolas? Okay. All right, well then let's get going. Now, like I said, there are actually 3 forms you can write a parabola. There's standard form, turning point form, and there's also something called root form. And so root form is what I'm going to concentrate on for the beginning of this lesson. So that's a little bit large, but you kind of get the idea. So let me get rid of so finding the equation of a parabola from the graph. Now, the root form, what it does is it has y equals a, and the a is the normal a, it's just a happy or unhappy face. But then what we do is we go x minus something and x minus another something. And what that something is the x-intercept. So if the x-intercept 1 is x1 and this is x2, we can then use this form, what we call the root form of a parabola, to help us find the equation of the graph. And all we need is the 2 roots, and then we need one other point. And what will we do with the one other point? Well, we'll simply sub it in. So if we have one other point, we'll sub it in here for y, and we'll sub it in here for x. So if we have the point like, say, 2, 7, you'd put 2's where the green things are, and you put a 7 where that is. And then you'd already know what x1 and x2 are, and you'd work out a. Let me show you with an example, because otherwise it's probably a bit weird. So here is a question. Determine the equation of the parabola here. And what I'm going to start with doing is I'm going to start by writing it in root form and say, look, what are my x-intercepts? Well, the x-intercept over here is 1, so I put minus 1. And the x-intercept over here is 5, so I put a 5. Now, I can't use these 2 points. I have to use the other point I'm given, which is minus 1, 12. So now I'm going to take the minus 1, 12, and I'm going to sub it in here. So I put a 12 here. And then where there's an x, I'm going to put a minus 1. Now, I want you guys to work out what is the value of A for this parabola? Over to you. Work out the value of A. So welcome to Aisha, Dylan, Bukhle, Naledi, Njabulo, Nomfundo. It is great to be with you guys. We are on lesson number, what is lesson? Lesson number 1, 2, 3 in functions. And today we're going to be doing parabolas and a bit of, maybe even a bit of hyperbolas, but mainly parabolas. Okay, what value of A are we getting? Well, that's -2. That's -6. That's 12. What's that? Oh, that's times 12. Okay, what is A going to be? Let me know in the chat. So the only value that I can see for A that's possible is if I bring the 12 across, I have 12 over 12, which is 1. All right, so now the question is, what is the equation of this parabola? That's what they asked me. Well, the equation of the parabola is 1 in front with a x minus 1, x minus 5. So the 1 was the thing that helped us do the work. Now, I want you to take this root form and I want you to translate it into standard form. How am I going to get this root form into standard form now? Give me a hint in the chat. Who feels like, how do I get it into the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c? Who has some ideas for me? Share your knowledge with your classmates. Who thinks they know? Aha, we need to multiply out. Thank you, Dylan and Bouclet. So we're going to multiply this by this and this by this. So we get x squared minus 5x. And then we're going to multiply the minus 1 times the x, so minus 1x, and then plus 5. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look for like terms, and we're going to see, well, minus 5 minus 1, so minus 6. And so the equation of the parabola is y equals x squared minus 6x plus 5. And all we had to do was multiply it out. So going over what we've done so far, step 1 was to write it in root form and then fill in the missing, well, the x-intercepts using the graph. Okay, so that was step 1. Step 2 was to sub another point that was on the thing in and find A. And the last step was to multiply it out to get standard form. Okay, now it's time for you to shine brightly. I want you to find me the equation of this parabola. And I will give you the hint that a good place to start is there. But I want you to get stuck in and then tell me when you're done, or ask a question in the chat. So what we're doing is we're trying to get the equation of this parabola. I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm assuming you're all working hard and I'm waiting for you to say done in the chat. Watch out for the double negative. That was a little bit sneaky. So I get that A is minus a half. Does anybody agree with me? Does anybody disagree? So I took the point 0 to 2. I put the 2 for the y and the thing for the x. But then what might have caught some of you is minus 1 is plus 1. Okay, so that's the one thing. And then 0 minus 4, okay, that's that. 2 over minus 4, yep, it's minus a half. Now, I want you to take that minus a half, and I want you to think, ooh, if I wanted to write this in standard form, what would I do? And what I want to say to you is, rather multiply out these two brackets first, get a whole bunch of things and simplify it, and then apply the minus a half at the end. So your next step after getting a is minus a half is I want you to write this parabola in standard form. But in order to do that, you're going to have to first multiply out these two brackets, and then at the end, you'll multiply minus a half. Okay, so over to you. And again, I'm waiting for confirmation in the chat of being done before I say anything more. But you're trying to get this parabola into standard form now. So this actually minus minus becomes a plus. So this becomes a plus 1. So once I clean up the multiplying out, I get x squared minus 3x minus 4. But now the last step is I need to multiply this minus a half into the bracket. And I get minus a half x squared plus 3 over 2x plus 2. And so the standard form of this parabola is that. Give me a score out of 10 for how well you're understanding finding the equation of a parabola. I want to do another example, but I want to know how much more explaining I need to do. And your scores out of 10 will help me understand where I must pitch my explanation. Okay. So think of it as a series of steps. You're going to get given a drawing. The first step is to write it out in a certain format. The next step is to sub in a point. So I'll even show you on this example I just did. So step one was this part, where you wrote it in root form. Step two was to take a point and sub it in. And then I suppose step three was finding A, and then step four was actually putting it back in. Let's do another one where we practice this. We just keep on swimming, okay? We just keep on practicing. So it says here, determine the equation of the parabola for each of the following. I want you guys to write down the very first line that you think I'm going to write. And once you've done the first line, just say first done. So first done in the chat. Because then I know we'll do it step by step now together. So we're trying to find the equation of a parabola that has x-intercepts 1, 0, 4, 0, and goes through 2, minus 1. Okay, so step one was to write this and then have the point at the end here. Okay, now step two is going to be finding the A value. So off you go and find me A, and you just say second done when you're done with the second one. Or you can just put your A value in the chat. Okay, so now what we have is we have A is equal to a half. So the second step is done. Now the third step is I want you to sub the A back in and get me the standard form of this parabola. So when you're going to do that by yourself now. So you're going to take the A value, put it back in there, and you're going to try and remember what to do. And you just say third done when you're done with it. But if you have a question, pop your hand up. Remember, you can even ask an audio question if you like. Sometimes that's quicker than fiddling with your cell phone. But otherwise, a chat question is also fine too. Okay, so the equation of this parabola is y equals a half x squared minus 5 over 2x plus 2. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that up on the board. But for those who feel like things are going well, I want you to do 1.4 by yourself. So find me the equation of the parabola, which goes through -1, 0, and 3, 0, goes through the point 2, 1, and I want you to put it in standard form for me. Okay, off you go. Let's do this. So those who want to ask questions about 1.3, it's on the board. Those who are ready to rock and roll, you can go for it yourself there. Okay, so Anushka has asked, when you ask a question like this, do you get marks allocated on the allocation on the number on the graph? So, okay, well, let me try and just say how you would allocate marks for this. So you would normally get, for example, here, 1 mark for that part, 1 mark for getting the A value, and then 1 mark for correctly getting to the standard form. Sometimes I've seen a second mark given here, but this would be a 3 or 4 mark question. Does that help, Anushka, for what you were asking about, just sort of the general mark allocation for doing this? I'll also mark allocate for 1.4 as well. Wait, let me rather do an extra step for this. Now let me sub in. So I get, for putting my y and x on the graph. If you're drawing graphs, so in the previous lesson, we spoke about how to sketch graphs, and you do need to label your graphs to get a mark. But I would say, Anushka, maybe have a look at the previous recording. But if you had to draw a graph like this one here, you'd get probably 1 mark for the x-intercepts, 1 mark for the y, 1 mark for the axis of symmetry, 1 mark for the turning point, 1 mark for the labeling. So that's how I would mark if you were drawing a graph. But it was more the focus of the previous lesson, but I will talk more about it if you'd like. Yeah. Okay, so let's find the equation of this graph in standard form. I know this is -1/3. I know this is x plus 1, and this is x minus 3. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do the multiplying out first, so that part is done first, which then gives me y equals -1/3 x squared minus 2x minus 3. And then this final one, it's going to be a plus 2/3x, and then it's going to be a plus 1. All right. Give me a score out of 10 for how well you feel like you're understanding finding the equation of the parabola. Just want to get a feel for how you guys are feeling, and then we'll just have a quick little break, and then after the break, we'll talk about finding the equation of the parabola, but when using the alternate or turning point form. Pop your vote in the chat so I know how you're doing and how you're feeling. It just helps guide the class. Okay, everyone. So we're just going to make it a short, quick little break, but I really do want everybody to get up. So get up off your chairs just so that your body can have a bit of a release. And let's just start with shaking out our arms. So we're going to make these breaks even quicker so we get more time for maths. But it's important we just kind of move our body around a bit. Shake out your legs. So we're just shaking them out. We're just going to roll our shoulders back. And then we're going to roll our shoulders forward. Okay, then arms to the side, just some small circles. Going forward, going back. And then let's do some jumping jacks, just to really make sure we're awake. In 3, 2, 1, let's go. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and our mini exercise break is over. I do hope you gave your legs a bit of a break. And then before we move on, here is today's brain break. So these look like puppies of some sort. What is in the final box over here at the end? See if you can work out what that is using the puzzle. So Naledi, you're on the money there, indeed. This little puppy looks like it's 7. Now, what is a yellow puppy worth? I think we can all see that. Has to be 3, 3, 3, 3. So now what is an orange puppy worth? So actually it has to be 6. And what is my final answer going to be? 7. Okay, so it's plus minus. So this BODMAS isn't complicated. So the final answer will just be 7 plus 6, which is 13, minus 3, which is 10, plus 6, which is 16 is what I get. 16, yeah. 16. Okay. Awesome. Okay. All right, everyone. So that is our little puzzle for today. That was actually quite an easy one, but it's kind of nice just to let our brains get distracted for a second. Let's go back to today's work. Now, I want to give you a different type of question for the second half. And this type of question is a little bit different because it says, if the turning point and another point are given, use this format. Now, before you were given 2 x-intercepts and another point, but here the graph doesn't cut the x-axis, so there are no x-intercepts. So instead of using the root form where we had this situation, we're going to start with the turning point form. Okay, but we have to be careful when we're going backwards here. So we're going to try and first put information from here in here. So I'm going to start by saying, look, I know that I need an a, but I don't know what the value is. I then have an x plus something squared plus another something. Now, with a turning point, the really easy one is this value here. This is going to be a plus 1, okay, because you remember at the beginning of the lesson, the turning point is just minus PQ if you're using the alternate form or the standard or the turning point form. So that will be 1. Now, what's more difficult to know is what goes over here next to the x. What goes over here next to the x? So if I'm trying to say, look, I know the turning point is -3, and I know this is the standard form, what is going to be next to this? It's actually going to be a plus, yes. And a plus what? It's a 3, yeah. Because if you took this form and you went, what is minus PQ? It would be -3, 1, which is the turning point you got here. So that works out fine. Okay, now, this is the second part is actually very familiar to what we did before. There's an extra point that you've got here, and that point is 1, 5. So I want you to take the point 1, 5, and I want you to sub it into this and find me the A value. So sub that point 1, 5 into the form of the parabola we have so far and get me the A value. So what is the A value going to be if we sub in the point 1, 5? Well, let's see. There's the A, and I put a 1 here. So we get, that is going to be 4 squared, which is 16 plus 1. Now we have to take away 1 from both sides. So we get that. Let me just make that a bit clearer. What is the A value going to be that we're looking for? See, we took the 1 from here and we put it over there. We took the 5 from here and we put it there. And we took away 1. So we took away 1 from both sides. That's why the 5 became a 4. The way to undo the 16 is divide both sides by 16. Or to move the 16 to the other side. So we are going to get A is 4 over 16 or a quarter. So now the equation of the parabola in the turning point form is going to be a quarter x plus 3 squared plus 1. So that is the turning point form of the parabola that you see in the picture over here. Now, this is not standard form. This is the turning point form, but that's fine. You can just leave it in turning point form. Give me a score out of 10 for how well you understood that example. I think you're probably ready to do one by yourself, but I want to get a feel for the opinions of the group. So score out of 10, tell me how you're feeling about doing that example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you need to find me the equation of the parabola in the gray picture. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave, let me see if I can move it across. Here we go. I'm going to leave it over here with the example of the previous one still on the board. So you are going to try and find me the equation in the turning point form of the gray picture on the board. And the reason we're going to use the turning point form is that we are given a turning point and we are given one other point. And so you're going to have to use those 2 points using the method you have up here. Okay, off you go. And then you tell me done when you are done. So help me out with what goes next to the x. Help me out with what goes next to the x here. So this is going to have to be a +1 in order to get the -1 at the turning point. Now, also notice this is an unhappy parabola, and so I'm kind of hoping my a is negative, because if my a isn't negative, I probably made a mistake. The next thing I write down is the other point. Now, the other point is the y-intercept, so it is going to be the point 0, 3. And that point you're going to have to sub in. So I want you to work out the a value and then tell me what you get for your a value. So we get 3, we get a, 0 plus 1 squared plus 6. And then what have we got? Now 1 squared is 1. Oh, that's not very exciting. So a plus 6. So then a must just be, take away 6 from both sides. It's -3. So the good news is the negative I was hoping to get has appeared. And then the final equation of my parabola in the turning point form is -3x plus 1 squared plus 6. Give me a thumbs up if that one went okay for you. Give me a thumbs down if it didn't go so good, if it felt a bit confusing. Keep the thumbs up, thumbs down thing going. It's always good if the team is communicating. All right, I see those hands. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, don't be afraid to express difference, everyone, because we're all at different places in different schools. And I am using the fingers and the scores out of 10 to help guide me. But it's important that you let me know how you're genuinely doing. Okay, let us do this one. Determine the equation of the parabola that has a turning point of this, but and it goes through the point -4, -4. I want you to try and do this one for me all by yourself. Let's do it. So what is going to go next to the x? Yeah, it's going to be that. Okay, what's my a value going to be? That's the next little question. So that's so a is going to be minus 5 over 4. And so then the final step would be to write that the equation of this parabola, so this will be an unhappy parabola, and it will look like this. Okay, now I think to finish today, you are going to draw me this parabola using the 5-step process from the last lesson. So step 1, step 2, in fact, maybe we don't even have time to draw it, but I want you to put down the 5 bits of information, and then we'll draw it together to finish today's lesson. So we're going to try and draw the graph of y equals minus 5 over 4 x plus 2 squared plus 1. And I want to know, to draw a graph, there's a 5-step process for us to eventually get it onto a Cartesian plane. What is step 1 going to be? What is step 1 going to be? So the form or the shape of the graph, and the thing that's going to affect the shape of the graph is the a value. So what is the shape of this graph going to be? It's an unhappy graph or sad. And so it's going to look like this because a is less than 0. Okay, step 2 is my y-intercept. Get me the y-intercept for number 2. Get me the y-intercept for this graph that we're trying to draw. How do you find y-intercepts? You make x equal to 0. So we have minus 5 over 4, 0 plus 2 squared plus 1. So that is a little bit of a mouthful. So I think you're going to get minus 5 over 4, and that's going to be times 4 or 4 over 1. Oh, but that's kind of nice because the 4s, now obviously your calculator will be your friend here, but minus 5 plus 1 is minus 4. So the y-intercept is going to be that. Okay, now what about the x-intercept? For the x-intercept, you need to make y equal to 0. I'm going to give you some time to find what is the y or the x-intercept of this graph. What is the x-intercept of this graph? Maybe I should do some extra space up here. So in order to do this one, I need to get this x by itself. Okay, so because we're running out of time, I'm helping you do this in a little bit of a speedy way. Now, we're solving this. You could have broken it up, but basically, when you square root here, you're going to get plus or minus. So you're going to get the square root of plus or minus 4/5. And then on this side, you're going to get x plus 2. And then, really, you're going to have to just bring that. So you're going to get x is the positive 1 minus 2, or x is the negative 1 minus 2. And those are the two possibilities for the x-intercept. Now, I probably went a little bit fast there for most people, but just to kind of show you what I was doing, I took y and I made it 0. And then I just moved the 1 across. I then divided both sides by minus 5/4. I then square rooted both sides, and I got positive and negative. It's like if you square root 4, right, you get the answers are plus and minus 2. So the same thing is happening here. But then for each side, I had to take away 2. And so that would give you my x-intercepts. Now, last bit is, what is the turning point? Well, the good news is because, well, you know the turning point is minus 2, 1. And the axis of symmetry, you don't even have to work it out. It's just going to be x is equal to minus 2. So those, and using that information, those 5 steps, you could now draw the parabola. But I'm going to stop there for tonight. Are there any questions or comments about that drawing of the graph part? I know if you missed the last lesson that you might be a bit like, what? But give me a score out of 10 for how well you understood my explanation for this last bit. Just so I know, because I can always come back to it in the next lesson. But